On the 15th floor of Morgan and Lyle, one of the city's most prestigious consulting firms, people were used to glamorous in-house parties, elegant trays of catered food being set out and cleared away, and the echoing laughter of perfectly tailored suits. But there was one person who rarely drew attention at events like these: Mrs. Rina. Mrs. Rina worked in logistics. She handled refreshments, tidied up meeting rooms, and occasionally helped in the kitchen. She wasn't particularly old, just past 50, petite in stature, usually seen in a worn-out turtleneck sweater, faded flats, and always carrying a gray canvas bag slung at her hip. She spoke softly and politely, but rarely did anyone respond with more than a distracted nod. Here, everyone was too busy chasing deadlines and profit margins to spare a word for someone outside the professional tier. That day was a cold, late winter afternoon, following a small office party celebrating a new project. Once everyone had left, Mrs. Rina quietly began to clean up. There was still plenty of food left: sandwiches, salads, pastries, unopened juices. She looked around, then gently opened her canvas bag and carefully wrapped a few items into a crumpled paper sack. Her hands trembled slightly, as if even she wasn't sure whether it was allowed. A flicker of gratitude crossed her eyes, only to vanish at the sudden sound of approaching heels on the marble floor. "What are you doing?" A man's voice rang out. It was Julie, the finance director, his hair slicked back, expensive leather shoes gleaming under the hallway lights. Mrs. Rina froze, gripping the top of the paper bag. "I just took a bit of the leftover food, so it won't go to waste." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Julie raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of surprise and disdain. He didn't say another word, just gave the room a sweeping glance and walked off. But that moment, seemingly small and fleeting as a wisp of smoke, took an unexpected path straight to the ears of the company's new CEO. A man no one in the office knew well, as he mostly worked remotely and kept a low profile. No one realized that in the very instant Mrs. Rina carefully packed those leftovers, a quiet chain reaction had begun, and the man on the highest floor of the building, where the wind didn't reach and major decisions were made, took more notice of that crumpled paper bag than any profit report that crossed his desk. His name was Marcus Keene, 58 years old. Newly appointed as CEO less than 4 months ago, he chose to work remotely, rarely seen, rarely heard. During Zoom meetings, he would often turn on his camera halfway through, his voice low and steady, his gaze guarded like a man reading a novel only he understood. To the staff, Marcus was a polite question mark, not intimidating, but not exactly approachable either. On Monday morning, while others were grumbling about traffic or dragging themselves through their first cup of coffee, Marcus sat quietly in his home office, a small room paneled in oak with a window overlooking a winter garden. On his screen was an internal email, brief, accompanied by a still from the 15th floor's security camera. A logistics staff member possibly took leftover food from Friday's event, intent unclear. Normally, something like this would have been filtered by his assistant, but Marcus had an odd habit. Every Monday morning, he would read 10 random internal emails out of hundreds, believing that sometimes the smallest things revealed the truest nature of an organization. He stared at the image, a gray-haired woman, leaning over, carefully wrapping a few slices of bread and some fruit into an old paper bag. Nothing alarming, but not exactly ordinary either. Marcus zoomed in. Her hand rested on the sandwich like it was something deeply important. Not the gesture of someone stealing, but of someone who had once had to weigh every bite. There was no look of relief on her lips, only the careful restraint of a person who had asked her own heart many times for permission to do a small kindness for herself. He set his teacup down and typed a quick message to his assistant. "I want to know more about her, not her job history. I want to know the real person, how she lives, how she gets home, what she likes to eat, who she talks to the most at work. Quietly. Don't make her uncomfortable." The assistant, a sharp young woman who had followed Marcus from his previous company, knew that when he said quietly, it wasn't about secrecy. It was about watching with deep respect. Marcus looked out the window. Snow had begun to fall gently. He thought to himself, someone who cherishes what others throw away is often someone who's been left behind. And so, from one seemingly insignificant email, a small journey began, not to investigate, but to understand. Her name was Rina, 63 years old. She worked in building logistics on the evening shift from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. No one called her Miss Rina. Most just referred to her as the cleaning lady if they addressed her at all. She had never complained, never taken unexpected leave, and never been present enough for anyone to feel the need to care. But for Marcus, after that morning, Rena was no longer just another anonymous employee. She became a piece of the puzzle he couldn't ignore. He didn't want to dig into her file or summon the head of facilities. Instead, Marcus decided to walk. On Tuesday afternoon, he appeared in the company lobby, unannounced, unescorted, wearing a gray coat and a slightly crooked knit hat. The receptionist froze for a second. No one had ever seen the CEO take the employee elevator. Marcus chose to wait on the 15th floor, the same one where Friday's party had taken place, the same one where the camera had captured Rena's image. He didn't hide, but he didn't try to be recognized either. He stood by the stairwell, watching the end-of-shift crowd filter out. At 9:55 p.m., Rena appeared. She was thin, but not frail. Her steps were brisk, carrying an old canvas bag and wearing a weathered windbreaker. She gave the security guard a small nod, smiled a faint smile, thin as a wisp of smoke, and quietly made her way to the train station. Marcus followed from a few meters behind, not like a detective, but like someone searching for the answer to a question he didn't yet know how to ask. At the train platform, Rena didn't board right away. She sat down on a bench and pulled a paper food container from her bag. It was leftovers from the office party, still neatly wrapped. Next to her sat a boy, maybe 10 years old, his face smudged, wearing an oversized coat. He had clearly been waiting. She handed him the box with such care that Marcus felt he wasn't witnessing someone giving away leftovers, but something sacred. No explanation, no apologetic glance, just an older woman quietly bringing a bit of warmth to the end of a child's day. Marcus didn't approach. He stood silently as the snow fell gently around him, his chest tightening like someone had placed a soft but unyielding hand over his heart. He didn't know who the boy was. A grandson? A neighbor? Someone's child Rena helped care for? He only knew one thing. He had found his reason to go further than that Monday morning email. Not out of suspicion, but out of respect. The southward-bound train ran late. The 10:30 p.m. ride was nearly empty. No voices, just the steady rhythm of the wheels clattering over cold steel tracks. Rena sat by the window, one arm cradling her food bag, the other rubbing her knee, sore and chilled from the long day. Marcus was no longer following. He had returned to his office. But what he didn't know was that Rena's journey home didn't end at the train platform. After getting off the train, she walked. Not because there was no bus, there was, but she saved the $1.75 fare each day. "It's not that far," she often said, though the walk was nearly 2 miles through a rundown neighborhood and across a creaky wooden bridge that spanned a shallow creek. That road was pitch dark. Some streetlights flickered, others had gone out months ago. But she didn't need to see. Her feet knew the way. As if her old shoes had their own memory, recalling every cracked stone, every pothole left unattended. By the time she reached the aging apartment complex at the end of the street, the clock read nearly 11:20 p.m. She climbed to the 3rd floor, each step groaning like an old man with aching bones. The door creaked open. No barking dog, no TV noise, just the soft glow of a desk lamp and the faint scent of herbal medicine in the air. Inside the room, Mr. Nando, her husband, lay in bed propped up by pillows, his eyes half closed. He'd suffered a stroke last year, leaving the lower half of his body paralyzed. Every daily need now depended on his wife. Before that, he had been a carpenter, a gifted one, whose hands could turn wood into anything. Now those same hands trembled too much to hold a spoon. Rena took off her coat and gently placed the food bag on the kitchen counter. No sighs, no complaints, just another day like any other. The late dinner began. A bit of chicken, a few slices of still fresh bread, and the small pastry she'd saved for him since Friday night. "Does it taste good, love?" she asked, handing him a warm cup of tea. Mr. Nando smiled faintly, a soft glow of joy flickering in his clouded eyes. Rena never saw herself as suffering. To her, happiness was still having each other, still being able to cook for him with her own hands, still strong enough to walk those nearly 2 miles home in the biting cold of winter. No one at the company knew about that apartment, about the husband who couldn't move, about the late night train, about the evenings she spent giving him his medicine, humming lullabies like when their children were small. No one, except for the man who was beginning to understand. Some employees quietly carry entire worlds on their shoulders and never once ask for a thank you. On Saturday morning, Marcus sat in his car, parked at the end of Maple Lane, a tucked-away street behind the main residential blocks, the kind of place few people noticed unless they actually lived there. He'd never been here before. Using the address his assistant had quietly pulled from Rina's personnel file, he had only planned to pass by and take a quick look. But when his car rolled to a stop in front of Building 17B, Marcus found he couldn't just drive away. The three-story building was painted a dull gray, its paint chipped and faded like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. Iron window frames were rusted, and some panes had been patched with cardboard or old canvas. Near the entrance, someone had scrawled in messy graffiti, "We still live here." There was no lobby, just a narrow, dim hallway leading to the stairs. The staircase had no railing, and every wooden step was deeply worn in the center, etched by decades of footsteps going up and down. Marcus didn't go inside. He just sat in his car and watched. An elderly woman with silver hair and a petite frame was carefully hanging a washed blanket over the third-floor balcony, Unit 3C, according to the file. It was Rina. No coat, just a thin cardigan. She wore house slippers, squinting into the sunlight. She had no idea anyone was watching. Marcus looked around. Beside the apartment was an overgrown vacant lot where a few kids were kicking around a half-flat soccer ball. Across the street was a tiny convenience store, shuttered, with a sign that read "Open weekends only." No park, no nearby bus stop, no bird song, just the constant hum of old air conditioning units buzzing against the walls. He let out a sigh. With the salary the company offered, even at the lowest level, no one should have to live like this. But he also understood sometimes no paycheck is enough to offset illness, old age, and the sudden blows life throws your way. He watched as Rina turned and stepped back inside, gently closing the old screen door behind her. So gently it was as if she was afraid to disturb anyone. This isn't a home, Marcus thought. It's a fortress, a worn-down but unshakable fortress where a small woman is carefully stacking bricks of dignity and pennies of hope to protect what's left of a life hard-lived. And in that quiet moment, the CEO of a million-dollar company suddenly felt small. Not because of status, but because for the first time he truly grasped the towering strength of a human soul, not spoken in words, but revealed in quiet endurance. On Sunday morning, apartment 3C was bathed in the faint light that filtered through the old, faded curtains. Rina was preparing breakfast, a thin porridge with a few slices of carrot. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the peeling knife, but her face remained calm, as if cooking was a quiet ritual amid the nameless chaos of life. From the next room came the sound of a faint cough. A weak voice. "Mom, water." She set the knife down, quickly filled a glass of warm water, and walked into the small room next door. There, a man in his 40s lay curled up on an old single bed, his body thin and his eyes hollow. This was Daniel, her only son. He had once been an electrical engineer, working for a large construction company until a workplace accident 6 years ago. A fall from scaffolding left him with a spinal injury, and he has been bedridden ever since. There was no full insurance, no large compensation. Rina had sold the small apartment she and her son had once lived in and moved to this rundown building to afford his treatment. But the hospital could only do so much. Now, Daniel relied on her for meals, personal hygiene, and daily medication. She had once considered applying for social assistance, but the complicated paperwork and repeated rejections made her put it aside. "As long as I can still work, I'm lucky," she often told herself. And so she continued to work, quietly asking for leftover food at the end of her shift to bring home to her son, not because she couldn't afford food, but because she wanted to save the better portions for Daniel. Marcus didn't know any of this. But that afternoon, when he got out of the car and offered to help her carry the bags of groceries at the end of the alley, she invited him into her home for a cup of hot tea. Apartment 3C, though run down, was clean and tidy. There was no smell of dampness, no sounds of complaints, only an atmosphere filled with patience and quiet love. Marcus looked around, his gaze stopping at the corner of the room, where there was a basket of adult diapers, medication neatly arranged on a plastic tray, and a clock with a handwritten note in slanted script reminding when to take the next dose. He looked at Rina, the woman he and many other employees had once walked past without a second thought. Now she was no longer a cleaning staff. She was a mother, a caregiver, a bearer of burdens, a pillar of strength. And suddenly Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. Rina, with her gentle face and sorrowful eyes, is the woman who has shouldered the entire family for many years. Every day she cares not only for her husband, who is paralyzed from a stroke, but also for her son, Daniel, a once promising electrical engineer who now lies bedridden after a severe car accident. Every night, when darkness fills the small house, Rina still cannot close her eyes. Both the men in her life are unable to care for themselves, and she is the only one who can help them. Her husband, though still mentally sharp, cannot move. Whenever he needs assistance, she gently lifts him, wipes his body, prepares his meals, and makes sure he is as comfortable as possible in his condition. As for Daniel, her son, he was once a strong and promising engineer. After the accident, his body was no longer his own. Being bedridden means he cannot work or take care of himself. That strong son now depends entirely on his mother. Rina is not just a mother, not just a wife. She is everything. Every day she faces exhaustion that she cannot share with anyone, yet she never complains. She knows the work she does is irreplaceable. For her, it is unconditional love. She does all of this without once asking for recognition because she understands that her family still needs her. Since her son's accident, Rina has had to give up her own job, accepting a lower income, and now she only works as a janitor in a small office. Every morning, she wakes up at 4 a.m., prepares breakfast for the whole family, and then goes to work. After each shift, she dives into household chores, takes care of her husband and son, and worries about their health. She has never thought of herself. When people ask about her health, she just smiles lightly and says she's fine. But only she knows that every night, sitting beside her husband and son, she feels utterly exhausted. Every time she comes home from work, her legs feel like they might give out from the fatigue. But she stays strong because she knows no one else can do it. The sacrifices she makes quietly, no one sees. No one knows how hard the days have been for her. But to her, the most important thing is her family, and she will do everything she can to make sure they don't feel deprived. Marcus stood silently in front of Rina's house, never expecting that after years of leading a corporation, he would feel so small. The house nestled in a deep alley, its walls faded, the metal roof bent and battered by storms, and the door was just a thin piece of wood without a lock, only a wooden bar resting across it, as if to say simply, "Here, there's nothing left to lose." He stood in a hidden corner, not entering, but just observing. Through a window covered by a tattered curtain, he saw Rina gently take the leftover food from a plastic bag, placing it into an old plastic container. It was half a sandwich, a few pieces of fruit, and a small portion of soup. She looked at it intently, as if it were treasure. Then she carefully separated the meat, perhaps saving it for someone else. The house only had 2 rickety wooden beds placed across from each other. On one bed lay Mr. Nando, thin, immobile, his dull eyes staring at the ceiling. On the other bed lay Daniel, her son, in his 40s, once a skilled electrical engineer, now only able to move his eyes and a few fingers. The accident had taken almost everything from him, except his will to live, and the mother who always stayed by his side. There were no advanced medical machines, no hospital bed, no special wheelchair. All Rina had were her small, calloused hands, worn by the years, and an unyielding spirit. In one corner of the room, Marcus saw a wooden shelf, neatly arranged with cheap medications, IV drips, diapers, everything carefully categorized like in a mini clinic. He realized this wasn't just a house lacking material things. This was the front line, a place where a lone woman stood firm every day, battling illness, poverty, and the social neglect. When Marcus saw Rina feeding her husband spoonfuls of soup, then gently helping her son sit up, he no longer saw an elderly janitor. He saw a silent hero, small in stature but with a heart that never tired. And in that moment, Marcus understood. The numbers in quarterly reports, the formal meetings, had never truly touched the real depth of a life. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He arrived home late, but the image of Rena's shabby house, the sound of the spoon tapping against the bowl, Daniel's weary eyes, and the trembling yet determined hands of that small woman kept playing in his mind. The armchair in his office was still warm from the last time he had sat in it during an online meeting with department heads. They had discussed cost cuts, process optimization, and employee efficiency, a phrase that now made his heart tighten. Marcus opened his laptop, pulled up the employee statistics, and typed in Rina Martinez. Her profile appeared, monotonous. Janitor, 17 years of service, minimum wage, no extended benefits. Notes, no complaints, diligent worker. That was all. None of the middle managers had ever known that she had a husband who suffered a stroke and a son who lay motionless. No one knew that she often brought leftover food home because she didn't want to spend her meager wages on herself. And worse, no one ever asked. He began digging through the internal performance reviews. Some hardworking employees, like Rina, were categorized as unremarkable simply because they didn't speak much during team meetings. Some wage increase proposals for the cleaning staff were dismissed because they didn't impact overall productivity. One HR assistant had even noted, easily replaceable if they quit. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, empty. Suddenly, he saw the entire HR system he was running like a machine designed to run smoothly but too cold. It saw people as cogs, not as humans. It didn't know about circumstances, couldn't feel the silent effort, and never acknowledged the sacrifices. He, the one who had set the employee cost optimization criteria last year, now felt each word like sharp blades cutting into his heart. "We can't keep going like this," Marcus whispered. Something inside him was shifting. A thought, an awakening, that maybe it was time to rebuild the system, not just based on numbers, but on understanding. Not just asking what employees can do, but also understanding why they keep going, even in the toughest circumstances. And Rina, the woman who once asked for leftover sandwiches, might just be the first brick for him to start everything over. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the headquarters earlier than usual. Still in his neat gray suit, but there was something quieter about his face, as if the thoughts from the night before had found their direction. He didn't head to his office right away. Instead, Marcus walked down the ground floor hallway, where Rina and her cleaning colleagues usually began their shifts. He walked slowly, observing every corner. The trash bins emptied, the chairs and tables neatly arranged, the floors polished. Everything was still orderly, just like every day, as if an invisible hand kept everything running smoothly without anyone noticing. He stopped in front of the employee notice board. Under the Employee of the Month section, there was still a picture of a young salesperson with an impressive sales record. Marcus silently took the picture down. Just a few hours later, the entire senior management team was called to an emergency meeting. Many worried eyes. No one knew what was happening. Marcus stood up, not holding any presentation slides. He only carried a thin stack of files, a list of longtime employees who had not received a raise in the past 5 years. He spoke calmly and slowly about a woman named Rina Martinez, who had quietly worked for nearly 2 decades, caring for her husband who had suffered a stroke and her son who was bedridden, living in a home barely 30 square meters in size and still bringing home leftover food every evening. "We've created a system that judges people by numbers," Marcus said, "but no number can measure dedication. No chart can reflect sacrifice, and if we don't change, this company will slowly turn into a cold steel block without a heart." Then he announced new decisions: a raise in base salary for the entire cleaning and silent operational staff, the establishment of an internal emergency support fund for employees facing difficult circumstances, no complicated paperwork required, a directive for the HR department to rebuild the evaluation system based on overall contributions, not just KPIs. And finally, he announced this month's Special Inspiration Award winner, Rina Martinez. When the meeting ended, the atmosphere was still quiet, but not due to skepticism, rather because of emotion. Slow nods, eyes meeting as if to say, "I wish we had cared more." Marcus left the meeting room feeling lighter. That day, he returned to the ground floor area where Rina was bent over, cleaning a stain beneath the staircase. He crouched down, handed her a freshly made sandwich, and smiled. "Rina, today, let me be the one to share a meal with you."
Rina, a small woman, quietly moving through life with diligent hands and a heart full of sacrifice. Her story not only moved me, but it also stirred deep thoughts within me. It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes in a box of leftover food, there lies a whole world we've never truly understood. Rina didn't ask for anything. She only requested a little food. But from that simple request, a door was opened. A door that led to the awakening of a powerful man, and to a system that had long been used to judging people through the lens of achievement. Her story reminds me that there are those who carry the weight of a mountain, yet pass by us with the lightest of smiles. There are contributions that don't appear in reports, that aren't on achievement boards, but form the foundation of an entire company, an entire community. And the most beautiful thing? It's when someone with the power to change chooses to listen. Chooses to look back and chooses to do what's right, even if it's late, as long as it's done. So, if today you find yourself sitting in a cold office or in a small cafe on the corner of the street, try pausing for a moment. Ask the janitor sweeping outside. Look deeper into the eyes of the person serving your lunch, because behind that, there might be a story the world has yet to hear. And who knows? You might be the next one to light the spark of change, just like Mr. Collett. Marcus did. Warm regards, Miss Ellie.